real as
All right, Becky, so what's your favorite word?
Is this a trick question? Like, my favorite color? Do you have a favorite word?
What's the word you use on a regular basis when I call and say, hey, my guy decided he doesn't like the property?
What the fuck?
And there you have it.
Oh, how did you know that? Yeah, it's probably.
So, here's the thing about, sorry, Mom. The problem with the word is not that it's offensive. I mean, it is offensive too. So there's a group of people that
like, darn,
right now.
find a new word. Yeah.
But that's not really the issue. The issue is its language ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a word and it can be an adjective, an adverb, a noun, a verb,
That's the glory in that word.
then it has no meaning. If you say everything is art, anything can be art, then you might as well just take that word and pull it out of the vocabulary because it doesn't mean it. So words are symbols for concepts. So when I say house, you are thinking of your house.
Mm-hmm.
My house isn't that different than your house. My house is smaller than your house, but it's not that different.
The house.
However, if you go to Shantytown in South Africa, Johannesburg, that's corrugated, I guess it's aluminum,
Mm-hmm.
propped up with cardboard over the top of it.
Yeah.
That's a different house. So it's still a house in essence, but it's very, very different. And so the farther we get from that concept, the more we don't know what we're talking about.
Right. But it's still in that concept, like the same meaning. Like you're not gonna put a different meaning on the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you take the word, it has been used so demonstrably for so many different things that now all it conveys is loosely some sense of the emotive response I'm having. So some people will say, that's effing cool.
Uh-huh.
They're not mad at all. If I say, man, that's effing uncool, I'm like super mad.
Right.
I just don't use it that often.
I know. I don't know if I've ever heard you say it until just now. I was like, oh, that's a word.
Well, and the thing about it is, again, I think like we kind of go, oh, it's such a bad word, and then we cause us to use it more. But the problem is really the language ambiguity is we don't understand we don't understand the concept behind it, and so we're trying to communicate with each other. And when it's like, listen, that, and this is fucking cool, and that fucking person, like we start to take. It's kind of like when you're on the phone and you get through that kind of half dead spot and every other word's fuzzed out, and you're trying to make sense of what the other person's saying, but you really can't. That's what we're doing with our language. And that's why the F word is so bad. It's not because it's like, oh, it's so offensive. I mean, it is offensive to a group of people. And certainly if you're one of those people, I'm not trying to offend you, but the real offensiveness is not offensiveness, it's dangerous. We are rendering ourselves completely incapable of communicating. You think about good. Like I have a good friend. He hooks me up a dime bag for half price.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good, but it's good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be like, I have this good friend. Your good friend does 40 hours a week of charity service.
Right.
We are talking such cross purposes that we just have no idea what the other person's saying. And then we wonder why the divorce rate's 57%. Divorce does not happen because of money. It does not happen because of bad sex practices. Divorce happens because of lack of communication. Sometimes over money, addiction, bad sex practices, whatever.
Absolutely.
But it's lack of communication. At some point, you hit that point with that significant other and you go, I don't know you anymore.
Yeah.
But what you actually don't know is not that person. It's you don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're feeling because they're so incapable of communication. So when we look at America today, and I know we're going into the election, and so it's like, this, that, and doom, and so forth. We don't have a moral issue in America. We have an epistemological issue. Epistemology is the idea that we don't know things. So epistemology is a study of how do we know what we know.
Mm-hmm.
So epistemology is a study of how we know what we know. I saw you at the store the other day, and I was like, oh, hey, Becky. And then it turned around, it was a dude. But he looked like you from behind, which good looking dude. I mean, good looking hair. And it was really awkward. I was like, hey, you're not Becky at all.
Yeah.
So in 1 second, I knew I was seeing Becky. In the next second, I knew I was not seeing Becky.
Interesting.
I mean, the 5 o'clock shot. You typically shave the 5 o'clock shadow.
I typically take care of that at least, every other day.
So epistemology is the idea of, okay, but how do we know what we know? Mm-hmm. So like, for instance, 4 people watch an accident, at a four-way stop, they will all have a different version of it. Eyewitness testimonies aren't that strong in court because we understand how unlikely it is for that person to viably have an accurate depiction. So even eyewitness testimonies are often thrown out or they have to be qualified.
Yeah.
So coming back to the problem with that word is it's overused and it's used so pervasively to try to span some, and other words too. It's not just the F word. We at this point don't know how to communicate with each other. We're using symbols that are not attached to concepts we have in common.
Okay. Well, I could spin that off and go the other route and say that I use the word to communicate very effectively, and it has so many different meanings that it's a beautiful, amazing word because I can use it for anything. No, I see what you're saying. I definitely see what you're saying.
Think like you use it pretty tactfully and it's pretty to point. Like when you do it, usually it's in humor.
Yeah.
So 90% of the time it's in humor. It is funny when you say it. I'm like, oh, look, potty mouth over here. The other 10% of the time though, you're frustrated, and I get it. But that's because we have a pre-existing relationship. Can you imagine if I just met you?
Oh yeah.
And you started to pop off like that?
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a.
You don't think you can figure that out? Like I'm still not sure I completely understand the problem with it, because I understand the problem because it's overused, and maybe my mind goes to people being undereducated and not having other words to fill those emotions to utilize. But for me, like I see the glory in the word fuck, because you can use it so many different ways, and I do always understand what people mean behind it. Like I can feel if they're angry, I can feel if they're sad, I can feel if they're excited.
But see, language isn't to express emotive response. That's your physical features, etc.
Okay.
Language is to precisely engender you to understand the concept. So I could use any word with the same intonation and you'd understand it. If I'm like, oh darn. Well, actually, sorry. Oh, light bulb. I hate that. You would still get the emotive response. It's not the precision of the word. It's not fuck that's giving me that empowerment.
Right.
It's the precision of the emotive response. However, getting past the emotive response, because we want preciseness, we want to precisely know what the other person's thinking, saying, trying to convey. It limits our ability to be precise. So it's not that you I shouldn't say I like it when you use the F word, but I do kind of.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, and it's also like you being you, and I love that. But if you use the F word all the time, and that's all you use, I wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. Like if I'm like, hey, is Ben's loan done? You're like, it. That doesn't tell me if it's done or not.
Right.
Okay, so when's Ben's loan going to be done? Forever. None of that helps me.
Okay.
So what has to be and this is the difficulty and it's not the F word, it's the F word, good, excellent, or let's go, or whatever it is. Awesome. All those words become so if somebody says, man, you're such an amazing human being, JP,
what does that
makes
mean?
me feel good.
Yeah, but
they'll be like, oh, you went to Iraq, you're such an amazing human being. Have you seen my amazing poodle? It can walk backwards. And I'm like, well, now I want to use
I don't feel so great.
Now I want to use that word. I'm like really? I had this experience one time, and the students were all like, why are all the teachers sad, blah, blah, blah. It's because one of the kids shot themselves. So they were like, oh, why is blah, 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 so we were told to tell the kids that a student had taken no details, but we needed to express that. It was our job to let everybody know.
Oh, gosh. So
I told my students, I said, well, everybody's a little bit somber right now because a student has taken their life. There'll be a memorial, blah, 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 on such a date. And she goes, oh, that's so sad, blah, blah, blah. And then she was a little intuitive. She was like, Mr. Poole, isn't that a student that you worked with for a long period of time? Absolutely. So then we're connecting. She's like, man, that's got to be so hard, blah, blah, blah. And she proceeded to tell me how she had lost her favorite sweatshirt, and she was comparing those two experiences. So for 10 minutes, we're using all the right language. And then I realized she has no scope. And in the precision of the language, that's when I realized that she has no scope. Like, we're not on the same page right now. But for 10 minutes, I thought we were on the same page because we're using such ambiguous language that doesn't have precise benchmarkers.
It is interesting too. I think that makes a lot more sense. And I always think about this, like the differences in people's thresholds and the differences in their experiences. Like they can compare things, like you're saying death to a sweatshirt. I had a really strange experience with a friend, and I'll shift this a little bit so that I don't get in trouble. But I had one of my friends in tears talking about how, you know, she was really sick. She'd gone through all the surgeries, yada, yada, yada. And another friend was sitting there with us. No joke. She goes, I know how you feel, because when I was, how do I change this? She goes, I snapped my pencil in half. It was literally that kind of comparison where she was so sick, having all these surgeries, and this friend looked her dead in the eye and said, I know how you feel, because I snapped a pencil in half earlier. And I was like, what? Just the different experiences people think are traumatic.
Sure.
And like we've talked about this, like the differences in what people can handle in a day. Like I had to realize that when people talking about how stressed they are, and it sounds just so silly to me, like that really is a lot of stress for them.
Sure.
Like, okay, that's okay, because that truly is how they feel. It's just everyone experiences things so differently.
Well, and I mean, going away from the F word,
yeah,
to good. I mean, like you hit it right on the head. Like that's exactly the problem. People ask me all the time, like, why are you so loyal to Becky?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a game where the less loyalty you have, the more money you make.
Right.
I'm not in opposition to that theory. I think it's absolutely true. Why are you so loyal to Becky? And I always say, because Becky is a genuinely good person. I never leave it at that. Like, what does good mean?
Right.
What is good? Like, is the burrito good? Is Kant's moral imperative good? Like, it's such a what? Good is like, they're the same word. So, good is used as often as, and is used as poorly as.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say Becky's a good person, I always give 3 qualifiers because of that. So I say she's very loyal. She's super attentive to being moral in all the details. And 3, she has a huge heart for community, not for me. I mean, you have a good
a huge heart for you too.
but you have a huge heart for people who don't have as much.
Sure.
And that's why I'm constituting you as good. If I don't say that, they're gonna think like, oh, like A, B, and C, and it's really D, E, and F for me.
Yeah,
so
it's very big and it's great.
That's why the F word being so used is such what I think is very, very, I'm fearful of it. I think it's super dangerous. And it's not because, again, we're going back to the 1920s, it's because of our inability to express ourselves. And if you look at it, it's a whole vestibule of words that have no meaning. It's the ones we're using all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to use those same ones over. We get these catchphrases and we use them, but like the other day, maybe it was today, you texted, let's go, or you emailed, let's go. Like that's it.
Yeah, it was this morning.
Let's go.
Where are we going?
Well, the thing about that is, I know what that means for you is, like, you're gonna work a 16-hour day. You're gonna like try to multitask 10 things at the same time.
Blast off.
Some people, let's go means I'm gonna get up at 10. I'm gonna skip 8 sandwiches and only have 3.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not going to the, like, let's go is a completely overused, and I knew what it meant from you, but that's because we have a pre-existing, fairly understanding relationship. Unfortunately, we're using that same lack of precision with everyone else, and then we wonder why there's so many conflicts. Like right now, you have half the nation wanting to kill the other half because they're voting for Trump.
Yep.
You have the other half wanting to kill the other half because they're voting for Kamal. And in the end of the day, we're all stuck with the same bad choice. You have a bad candidate and a bad candidate. And we're on the point of civil war over it. Well, why does that happen? People go, oh, because of A, B, and C, and this and that. Those things are all contributing factors. But what we really did is we had a utter breakdown in communication. We cannot communicate.
Yeah.
Like really, at the end of the day, how many times have you seen people, and as they get a little more emotive, instead of getting more precise with their language, the F word becomes their go-to.
They're tripping over words, and they can only find about 5 that are expressing some sort of emotion, but it's not actually expressing any thoughts that are going through their brain.
And that's that mental flexibility. Like, if you ask me right now to run 13 miles with you, I'm not doing it. Why? Because I haven't practiced. The last time I ran was a decade ago. So, like, yeah, I'll get on my little scooter and follow you around. I can't do it. Well, if you ask people in the midst of year 3 of their relationship and they're about to break up because they can't get over these insurmountable things within their relationship, and you ask them to do it, but they've been practicing very low, unesoteric communication, good luck with that. And that's why I have 57% divorce rate.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's lack of education, or do you think, because when we're just talking about language precision, it just reminds me of young kids, right? So it's almost the same thing. Is it that lack of education of not being able to get past how we communicated as children? When you look at kids, say girls who were, 12 or so, it's like, everything's like,
Yeah.
I was like, and it's kind of the same idea. So is it just, where is that breakdown in communication? Is it lack of education? Is it something else?
It's because we've gone from reading books to YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And because YouTube is a quick, you don't have to think. When you read a book, you're taking all the codes. So you take A, that's an article. You take that's a article as well. You take boy, that's a simple subject. You take the predicate, hit. You take all those words, and as you take those words, your brain has to decipher, what does that word mean? Let's decode it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we paint a mental picture of it. When you do all that reading, your brain is exercised in a way that it's not stimulated through YouTube. So I listen to YouTube, but instead of doing the decoding, that person tells me what to think.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually, we're seeing actually our very few readers that we still have, those readers are reading books and they're not even critiquing them.
Yeah.
Because they're so fastened into YouTube where you're told exactly what to picture, what to think. You're not actually engaged in any autonomy over that information, that data that's being downloaded. It's just being downloaded into you.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you then you have a group of people who don't read books at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going through that processing, that critical thinking. And the few people that do read books, 90% of them are just taking what the person writes and going, that's gospel truth. I've never read a book that I didn't disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that, but this is the problem.
And so you're taking opinions and making them God.
Exactly.
It's like these people who you're just listening to, it's
100%.
like, oh, they must be right. They're on YouTube. They
And
have 12 million followers.
It's like Jordan Peterson. I love his stuff. So 30% of what he says, I'm going to fight you to the nail. I don't think he's right.
Yeah. So this is kind of off the subject, but stemming off what you talked about, like when people ask you why you're loyal to Becky, you tell them because she's a good person. You have examples. You have firm truths and you have a very firm opinion on this, right?
Sure.
And you and I have a very strong friendship.
Sure.
And you brought up YouTube, so I'm just kind of like thinking. So yesterday, again, I had someone say they were talking to a group of people, and she said she's one of Becky's best friends. Blah blah blah. I said, whoa. No, she's not. And for me, you're one of my best friends. I think people get so confused in this day and age because we're on so much social media. What a real friend is. Is this person a very close friend of yours? Why? Like,
Right.
I couldn't think of one time I sat down, the girl she was talking about, I've never had a dinner alone with her. I've never gone on a trip with her. I don't confide in her about, what's going on in my life. She has no idea what's going on in my life. And I think people get so confused these days and are so willing to take what it should be so sacred as calling someone a close friend or a best friend, and they'll just use that term with anyone. Like you were
I
saying,
think that's such
good
a
friend,
good point.
best friend, and we
Yeah.
see these people online, and it's like, they're a friend of ours now. Oh, this is my friend John. Well, sometimes they've never even met John. It's so
Right.
strange to me. It's like,
It could be a serial killer.
yeah, it's like, that's not a relationship. Because you follow John online, you aren't friends.
Right.
Like, there's a deep commitment in a friendship, just like any strong relationship. And it's gotten so skewed and so just grayed out to where it's not important to people anymore. It's more important to say, I have good friends, I have great friends. It's like, well, do you?
Yeah. Well, and I think you're touching on something so insightful. Like, it's very astute, because what we're doing is we're trading the facade of things we're taking real things and trading it for the facade of things.
It's almost going back to the dopamine addiction. It's like, that's that bit of dopamine. Yeah, I have really good friends. Well, then why are you so depressed and alone?
Well, and then the
You can't follow
expectations, you can't regulate expectations. If I'm like, oh, Becky's my best friend, and then, hey, Becky, I'm really hurting right now, and you're like, oh, well,
Did you want to go out on Saturday still?
then yeah, like our expectations are all over the place because of that. So, and then the more we engorge ourselves with social media, which is not real relationships. I have some real relationships with people that are on social media.
Of course.
But that's because we've had real time. I don't have any deep relationships on social media with people that I've never sat and broke bread with.
And that is kind of, that's maybe one good thing about social media is that you can find people who you can build these relationships with who you may never have met, right?
Right.
I think you have a couple, I have a few where I'm just like, this is my person. I need to meet this girl.
Yeah.
She's amazing, and that's pretty cool.
But I do think, like, for me, like, it seems like with social media, it's like people who talk about going to the gym, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym, they write out this whole plan, they got on their little whiteboard, and then they get their dopamine hit because they made the plan and then they don't have to go to the gym. But the going to the gym is actually the value, not making the plan and getting the dopamine hit. It's the same thing with social media. Oh, I posted this again. I post things and sometimes I get a ton of interaction. It's like, oh, like, cool, people like me or whatever the feeling is. But then I refuse to take any dopamine off that because it's not real.
Yeah.
And then when I'm sitting across the table with you or with other people who I have real relationships with, then when I have those, I'm more hungry for those because I'm not getting filled up with this fake thing. It's kind of like my eating rice cakes. I lost 20 pounds eating rice cakes.
Nice.
I was in this competition and I kind of didn't know I was in this competition and I had to real quick figure out how a way to lose 20 pounds.
I remember this.
And so I ate rice cakes. Well, I filled myself up with those rice cakes because they're low calorie and they're just air. Yeah. And then I feel like I'm full. I'm not full. And then what happens is I'm starving myself and I'm having caloric deficiency. We have a relational deficiency. We stuff ourselves with these fake things. And I mean, sometimes it's a real person too. I've definitely had a good time with a bunch of people. And at the end of it, I'm like, I don't like any of these people. Yeah. I mean, it was fun. It was really cool when Bob got really drunk and did a table dance for everyone. But like,
what did I get out of that?
Like, what am I holding on to for tomorrow? Yeah. There's no actual substance to it. And so I trade the reality, the deep, actual, meaningful relationships for that. And so that's part of the is we're f***ing ourselves by using language where we can't possibly create a continuity, commonality with the person. Like if I'm talking valley talk the entire time, how much precision do you know about me at the end of that? You really do. And you're very, very intuitive. So it's a little easier for you. I like to think I read people pretty well too. Right. But at the end of the day, I don't have a deep relationship with somebody who I've read them like a diagnostic in a psychology case study. I have real relationships with people who proffer information about themselves and who I proffer information, and it becomes meaningful in the transfer between the two of us.
Well, and there's something really scary about what's going on too. I think you said we're in a relationship emotional deficiency. You talked about how people are, I mean, social media is just this huge facade. And what's really scary about it to me is the people who are, like you're saying, planning to go to the gym, but they really don't. Or they do the one time and it's just to make those posts. Have you seen where people get caught like driving and then they'll like pretend they're running and they're just doing it to make a video? It's actually really scary to me because I think people are building this even bigger wall and mask and capability to hide extreme depression. Like they can post those things and it's like, oh, I went for this run today, I went and did this today. And really they're sitting in a dark room, maybe coming down off drugs, whatever it may be. You can hide what's really going on. You can hide this depression, you can hide maybe being suicidal, and it happens constantly now, right? Absolutely. Like no one ever knew because they're posting this highlight reel. You go on their Instagram and it's like, well, she was just in Yosemite hiking and, she and her boyfriend are this and that, and you find out it's all crumbled down. Like, none of it's real. And that's so sad and scary.
Why I hate the F word. Not because it's not ever used properly, it's because it's used most of the time interminably not properly. There's no precision in it, and it's used as a safeguard to not actually ever have a real conversation.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, man.
Yeah, I just fucked up your day, didn't I?
Just fucked up my whole day.
And again, going full circle back, you use the F word very tactfully, even though it's It's mostly done out of humor. It fits because you have this great vocabulary. You are very precise. When you take the time, you articulate very well. I never sat down when you've taken the time or read an email or a letter or whatever. I've never been like, oh, I wonder what's going on. Like you're very precise, so then you can afford the F word is spiced to an already substantiated meal of communication.
Yeah, just not oversatiated.
If you don't have all that and you're just using the F word, it's like, well, Becky,
we need to have a talk.
like, I don't know who you are and I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And now we have an issue.
No, that makes sense.
The other day, I was at the store and I saw you. I don't want to call.
Real as